In a survival situation, an infected wound could be your end, but many wild plants can be used to clean, protect, and prevent infection on a wound. For example, the yucca roots can be used for soap, yarrow leaves to prevent infection, promote healing, and Spanish moss as padding. So I decided I wanted to answer the question, if you lived in Texas 1,000 years ago, how would you treat a flesh wound?
To find out, I spent a month treating this gnarly wound using nothing but local wild native plants and Stone Age tools, all based on historical indigenous practices I found in my research, plus plenty of personal experience using these methods before.
Yarrow poultices are a staple, and I just always keep a vial of dried yarrow on me.
Yarrow has been used by indigenous peoples throughout the northern hemisphere as a wound care poultice. Got its genus name Achilles millefolium from Achilles, who reportedly carried it into battle with his myrmidons. The Karok Indians in Texas also did this, carried it into battle against the Spanish. So of course, when I first got this wound, I just applied yarrow. And I just put it on dry because I was eager to get this thing covered. And then I followed it up with some white sagebrush and then a little padding of Spanish moss, wrapped it up with some yucca leaf cordage. 24 hours later, I soaked it in warm water and then washed it gently with yucca root soap. So the next day I was running pretty low on yarrow, so I was like, I'll just use the white sagebrush that's also been used historically for poulticing, but this time I crushed it up. This is pecan oil. And added some oil to make a sort of oil infusion and have it kind of not stick to the wound as badly as the dried yarrow. This is thistledown. Use some thistledown for padding this time instead of the Spanish moss, although I did put some Spanish moss on top because I felt like it would help hold the whole thing together. Wrapped it up with some cordage again and trimmed it up, and both these poultices held pretty well. I wasn't super happy with the cordage wrapping though. Okay, 48 hours later, still holding strong. It feels fine. I don't feel any sort of heat or itchiness, signs of infection. Let's open it up and see what it looks like. So each time a little bit of the leaves are sticking to the wound, but I wasn't worried about that. I soaked it in clean water and washed it gently with yucca soap and let it dry. I'm out of yarrow and sagebrush, so I'm resorting to using juniper and bald cypress foliage are antimicrobial enough. Yeah, I think kind of a lot of stuff will work for poulticing. A lot of plants have some antimicrobial properties. Rough rule of thumbs, if it smells strongly or tastes really bitter, probably has some antimicrobial properties, but don't quote me on that. And this one I also did the same, so ground up, oil-based infusion. Same type of padding with the thistledown. This is really nice because it was a very sensitive wound. It's a very deep cut, and you have to use your fingers for a lot. But it was feeling kind of bulky at this point. Like I was annoyed with how I always had like this huge bulky thing on my hand. Okay, it's been 96 hours. I took off the poultice and washed it. I did the same thing at 72 hours. I just didn't show it on camera. For that, I also used the juniper and bald cypress. Today I went and got some fresh juniper needles. These ones have the cones, which reportedly are a little bit more potent. So I'll be adding that to the mix. And I went out looking for just anything antimicrobial, and there's just not much out right now. I didn't have much time to go down the street. But I did find this, which is Croton texensis, mildly antimicrobial, I think. It's got a strong smell. I'm just going to leave the bald cypress needles out. I feel like they're the least potent of the ones I have here. If I had the sap, that would have been better. So the juniper needles, they don't grind up very finely as well. Just not the best texture. So far, for sure, the yarrow is the best because it's not only antimicrobial, but it has some healing properties as well. I think it accelerates wound healing. And I'm using the same sort of padding here. If you kind of mat up or kind of felt up the thistledown, it forms a pretty nice pad, like a bandage. 120 hours. It really could benefit from more air exposure at this point, but it's just in such an inconvenient place. It's just got to be kept covered. Using the same poultice mix as yesterday. It's kind of a misconception. A lot of people think wounds need to be dry to heal, But the modern high standard of wound care is moist wound care. Okay, it's day 7, just washed it. And I'm gonna do what I should have done on day 2, which was remove this bit of dead skin in the middle. That's a crow feather that I split at the end with a little flint flake, and then I shoved a little pin of a juniper twig that I had notched in the middle to keep it open. Sorry, this is super nasty, but no other way to show what I'm doing. Cut it off with a piece of flint there. Flints actually can be sharper than pretty much any knife. That should help it heal more evenly, because right now it's put an indent in there and preventing it from the wound from closing up cleanly. I was hoping that a little bit was alive. It was kind of just so mangled, but I should have known by day 2 that it was not worth saving. But I just didn't want to mess with it. So now I'll be using cactus pad. There's so many different possible materials one could use for this purpose, and I realized that cactus is one of them. It being winter, it's kind of hard to find a lot anything else, especially like little herbaceous things. So this is where I start developing my cactus bandaid. So I cut off one side of the cuticle, leaving the other side wet, and I'll put that side down. I'm gonna try tying it with some strips of cedar. From this point on, I only use cactus for about 2.5 weeks, but I don't show all of it on video. There we go. This is day 8, and it's nice to know that a variety of different wild plants can be used for poulticing materials. I found some yarrow, which is the most potent thing that I would use, and then I was really pleased with the results of the prickly pear pad. I left a little bit of skin on there, which I'll pick out. Of course, I wash my hands and all my instruments with water and yucca root soap beforehand. I only used yarrow this once. Yeah, I decided to put yarrow on top of the cactus pad, which isn't really necessary. I just found some yarrow, and I was like, finally, I found yarrow. I could use it again. But then I was already compelled by the cactus poultice, because the way it was healing with the cactus seemed a lot better than the previous methods, and it was just so much cleaner, and it's really easy to pull off from the wound. It didn't get stuck like everything else was doing up till then, and the wound just looked a lot better and cleaner as soon as I started using the cactus pad. So that's what really started to sell me on it. And this wrapping right here, it looks really neat, but it actually fell off. It's day 10. So last night the poultice fell off, but I replaced it this morning with just some more prickly pear. Actually, it was just gauze to wrap around because I didn't want to mess with it. I noticed the prickly pear, when you remove it, it removes with it the scab that's forming. So there's this kind of collagen matrix that's intermixed with the prickly pear flesh that pulls away, so the wound is kept wet. So I can see why it's good for burns, because that's actually something that burn victims need to do, is keep their wounds from scabbing over, because there's so much flesh it can get tight and crack and cause further issues. So the best thing is just to remove that scab layer and just never let it form. That's why burn victims often have to be like scrubbed. Anyway, I'm gonna do it just with the prickly pear, but I have an idea for making it better. Here's where my idea for the cactus band-aid started, but you'll see at first I don't really know how to do it. I just kind of imagined it. Because I was getting really annoyed with the poulticing methods beforehand, just how bulky they were, and they required like 4 different materials, and I had to prep each of them. I was like, what if I could just do it with the cactus pad? Because this cuticle on it is like very tough. The cuticle is like the outer skin, and it's like waterproof. It's very thin. I was like, this is kind of like a bandage. And then I'd also been thinking about how the cactus mucilage works kind of as like an adhesive. It's not like super sticky and adhesive, but once it dries, it really does stick to each other itself really well. See, at this point, I had the part touching the flesh a little bit too wide. This bandage worked. It actually worked really well. But in future versions of this, I have the portion of the cactus flesh a little bit more narrow, because it helps keep it on better. But that stayed for 24 hours. And this is the second day doing the cactus bandaid. I was definitely sold on it because I was very impressed with how low profile it was and how well the cactus was helping the wound heal. And at this point, yeah, I started to apply the mucilage from the scraping to the outside, just sort of an additional bit of mucilage to help stay as an adhesive. This is the version where I'm doing it in the field. I have a full video just showing this method where with no tools, just with rocks and sticks, I, on the spot, make a cactus bandage using just a cactus. It's pretty easy to do. It's a very cool video. Check it out. And here's the day after that. I'm just doing it at home again. Each of these cactus pads can yield a few different bandages, but you want to watch out and make sure it's not like kind of going bad. Like when it has a bunch of exposed flesh, it can get like a little bit rotting. And once you have used it up,
Put this piece of bare soil. That'll probably grow a new cactus. What I usually do is I take the whole thing home to use for replacement bandages. They'll last a few days. You can get 5 bandages out of that. But I already have enough, so I'm gonna see if I can get this one to grow. So my wound is all but healed now, and today I just have it covered with a little strip of leather because I've been letting it dry out overnight. And the initial wound was so deep that it cut through almost all the layers of the epidermis and dermis. So that part in the center is sheared all the way to the fat layer. So that's why it kind of has to grow from the outside in and can't be replaced by tissue underneath, and why this wound was particularly difficult to deal with and had a long healing time. Most of the way healed, you can see that outer ring is kind of where blood got trapped underneath the edges of the initial wound. So the initial wound is the size of that outer ring, and then now it's healed up to that scab in the middle, so it doesn't really need any more poulticing. Just have to keep an eye on it and not let it open up or anything, and try to not use this finger. But for sure the cactus was my favorite bandage to use. You wouldn't think that it's like super antimicrobial or something, but it definitely was very effective. It didn't have any signs of inflammation or infection, and it was just really easy to make and wrap on and stay on and be low profile and easy to work around everything. And the other poulticing methods with the yarrow put on, I think that's really good for the beginning stages because it's going to be more antimicrobial and promoting the healing of the wound, but you do have to figure out a way to wrap it. One thing I didn't really use much of is cloth. That would probably be the easiest way to wrap it. Lentil or cloth historically though, so that's what I was trying to use some different materials. Leather or rawhide, it's a choice that you can, it's not too bad. It is a little bit, like the one I have now, I don't want to keep it on for too long just while I'm out in the field. It'll sweat in there and get moist, and that's not good for the wound's healing. And I thought that would be a problem with the cactus actually, because it stays moist for a while, but it kind of dries out after a few hours, and then it leaves the part moist over the wound, which was actually nice because usually anything you put a bandage on it, the scab will adhere to like anything, and when you pull it off you have to like soak it and be real careful and all that. The cactus, I never had a problem with that. It was so easy, and that's one of the reasons I liked it a lot. But I made a video showing just how to use the self-adhesive cactus band-aid. No tools, just on-site materials. You can check it out here. It's fully healed now, no scab, but you can see the scar tissue there. It's a very deep wound. It's got the scar there in the middle that's pretty sensitive though still. And I imagine that'll take number of months to be less sensitive. I have no medical training, and obviously none of this should be interpreted as medical advice. I'm simply relating my personal experience, experimenting upon myself for educational purposes. Take it easy.